Hello, everyone, and welcome back to No Bull with Nobu, the All-American Shaman. Nobu, thanks for joining. How are you doing today?
Thanks for having me, and fiery as per we just discussed.
Yeah, it's coming up on the winter solstice and get some light into these dark days leading up to us. And maybe we can talk today about boundaries. So this kind of tags along to the discussion that we had last time on energetic transfers and contracts and whatnot. So now maybe take it a little bit step further and what you can do going into these situations to protect your own energy by setting boundaries and maybe with the intention of combating any nefarious tactics or intentions of others. So, Nobu, where should we start off on here? Maybe how can we set boundaries or think about them?
So again, relating the different layers of the spiritual down to the physical, people, when we think of physical boundaries, right, you have the physical boundaries of your house. You have the physical boundaries also of your temple, your physical body. So what you allow inside of your home, right? You're not going to allow just anyone to enter into your home. At least I would hope not. Exercise discernment, not judgment, but discernment. Furthermore, exercising discernment and discretion in what you allow into your physical body. So what food you're putting in your body, what thought forms, right? Are you just watching doom scrolling YouTube willy-nilly and allowing anyone to reprogram your conscious and subconscious mind? So when we think about that at the more denser levels, then when we have our interactions, even with those we love or who are genetically related to us. And so there's that certain level of complicit alliance that we have, exercising discernment and discretion in what we allow into our own fields. So when someone chooses to try to hook us with a loaded topic or to make light or make jokes about certain things that we may not find so funny or find so humorous, it is important to establish boundaries on what it is we will and will not tolerate in our sphere.
Yeah, so it sounds like kind of on the front end, I can imagine my younger self that didn't necessarily have strong convictions one way or the other on maybe who I even was at the time and what I would want in my life, the discernment, like you mentioned, what types of personalities or people to allow in my life, which ones to maybe avoid. These things were a little bit more fluid. So it sounds like maybe the initial step is, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong here, like setting up your own framework for your own identity and kind of what you want to maintain and what type of environment you want to maintain.
Correct. Yes, if you don't know the direction you're heading or who it is you want to become at any dimension, right? Whether that be physically, as far as how do you want your physique to look, or as far as your personality, what is your character that you're trying to develop? Then you're not going to, as you said, be able to even develop a metric on what goes in and what goes out of any of these dimensions.
Yeah. So yeah, maybe we can kind of talk about that, like the framing of the character that you're trying to develop. What type of maybe personal work or practices or exercises would you suggest to folks that are maybe in that initial stage of trying to determine, what their goals are for themselves and what character they're trying to grow into? Some practices to get clear on that.
First one is journaling. um, you know, writing down each night. And I've had you and other clients do this as well, where, we're continuing to refine each night of the week before you go to bed. Like, who do I want to be remembered as, or who do I want to be known as? What does this character or persona look like? Are they gregarious, extroverted, you know, the life of the party? Are they more solitary? Are they, keep to themselves more introverted, and see if your actions align with that. Because if they don't, right, people, a lot of times people say they want to be, you know, the badass stoic, but they are all over social media. and just everyone has access to them and everyone has insights into their mind. You're not going to be that Richard B. Riddick or Jason Statham archetype if everyone knows your every single move, right? There's no
Right.
level of mystery about you, so you're not going to move in that direction. Uh, the second point to getting one towards a certain archetype would be to resonate with people of that energy. So if you want to have that more David Goggins mindset, then watching David Goggins videos or reading books by characters who have those traits is going to help, again, align your consciousness with consciousness of those. So again, going back to again, what you allow in your energy. If you're reading or consuming mindless media and entertainment and trainment, like the TV, um, then you are going to be mindless and you're just going to be all over the place with your consciousness.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good point. I know on television programming, I've heard folks say like, "Oh, it's just mindless TV. It's a guilty pleasure. It's just what I do to relax at the end of the day." Which fair enough, I guess, if you're tired and just want to have something where your mind isn't actively trying to problem solve. But like you're saying, if you're just kind of unconsciously and your subconscious is absorbing these things, it's going to have an impact on your thoughts and ultimately your behavior. So the discernment of what you're kind of passively consuming would also be really important there too. Something I wanted to maybe dive a little bit deeper into as you were describing that archetype that you might want to try to cultivate. How does that kind of play into this concept of authenticity, of being true to yourself? Is there almost maybe in like an egoic sense or personality sense, is there something at our core that is kind of there for our entire lives that we
Mm.
uncover, or is it more of shaping it like a piece of clay? What are your thoughts on that?
What immediately comes up for me in my practice as a shaman is the totem pole of different totem animals or spirits that each person has a unique amalgamation or chemistry of. So I'll briefly speak on myself to give context. The first animal I ever almost killed and had intense relationship was a black cat named Shep. When I was about 3 years old, I tried to ride him like a horse and I almost broke his back and killed him.
Oh,
And Shep also was a very badass cat. He survived 2 blizzards, got ran over 3 times. The third time was a charm. Um, he was a freaking savage. And then furthermore, I think I alluded to this earlier, I saw shadow cats. The first spirit I ever saw in a ethereal magical form were felines.
hmm
And I was also terrified of cats growing up. I was, that the fear also shows us uh the most intimate shadow of ourselves that we need to integrate. And if you would have told me as a young lad that Jaguar, Uncle Pantera, the black cat was going to be my primary totem, I would have said you were full of crap because I didn't resonate with that energy at all. I had to go through an evolution of different animal spirits like squirrel, wolf, owl, snake. And over time, then I was able to step into that energy. Another layer of looking at this is through astrology. Say someone is a Scorpio, which is a very intense, dark energy, and people think about scorpions and they have their own layers of fears or trauma that comes around that just with that animal, right? I mean, what it represents to their subconscious mind without knowing astrology, just as the animal scorpion. And people have to go through prerequisite schools of other planets in order to be able to fully resonate with what is their true totem or planet. Does that give some light on things? I know I went a little bit all over the place there.
yeah, maybe. So you have these animal totems, and they kind of impact or influence your personality, maybe your behavior types, maybe the ways that you react in certain situations. But they don't necessarily predestine or predefine the types of characters that you can build? Can you maybe have like anyone with any different type of totem can still create maybe a particular new character or personality or achieve a certain goal, or is it
There's some play here, there's some flux, but what I was more or less getting at is that if someone wants to be a scorpionic mother effer in terms of that again, that David Goggins mindset, that Richard B. Riddick, that very intense, cold, hard, strong archetype, that they are going to need to evolve into it. You can't just be that energy without going through the curriculum
mm,
associated with it. Conversely, on the other end, the lighter end of the spectrum, if someone wants to be an extremely powerful healer and be full of love and compassion for other people, they're going to have to go through the prerequisite curriculum. Again, from the astro element or the totem element, or again, just the school of hard knocks in terms of developing those skills associated with that archetype. It's kind of like when you ask God for strength, he doesn't just make you strong, he gives you heavier burdens, right? If you want to be more intelligent, you're not just going to get a stat boost to your IQ. You're going to need to read more books, you're going to need to get educated, and you're going to need to go through the layers and levels associated with that. But to go back to more directly what you asked, is there free will in terms of who people are in that aspect? And from where I'm sitting right now, I would say no. Um, I would say no. I would say that who you are becoming and who you are destined to be is just that, destined to be. We
interesting?
have, yeah. The more I go through this evolution, the more I see the divinity in there are no accidents and there are no coincidences for every tiny thing.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I guess maybe that's kind of when I was asking about the authenticity, because to me, when I read that word or, you know, contemplate on it, it seems like at the core or like the soul or whatever you want to say is that, that solid self containment. There's something there to perhaps be discovered, to be revealed, to be encouraged. And like you're saying with the journaling and maybe just observing yourself over time and seeing how you react in different and certain situations, that will kind of show you who this core entity
Mm-hmm.
is over time, and then perhaps that then can get cultivated and strengthened and expressed into its most grand expression.
Yes. Yes, I think that what we evolve into is predestined, but as far as the speed in which we get there, whether it be this incarnation or the next, etc., right? How many cycles of the wheel need to turn before we
Mm,
get there is a choice of how much work we put in. Again, if someone consciously chooses to just be mindless and just engage in hedonism and pleasure, then they're not going to achieve their purpose and they're not going to fulfill their soul in that way. But yes, through the modalities we just illustrated, such as journaling and meditation, and I would say putting oneself through one's deepest fears and greatest trepidations. Because again, fear, false evidence appearing real. When we
mm.
go into the abyss in the dark of the unknown, that's where we find the light.
Right. Yeah, I think we touched on that subject kind of earlier on with building strength. It's like you're not going to gain strength unless you're putting yourself in these challenging and uncomfortable situations. There is no growth like without pain. You know, growing pains is it's a term for a reason. It usually hurts to grow and expand and evolve. So maybe kind of coming back to that more theme around the boundaries. So once somebody has maybe a little bit more refined sense of their self, of that authenticity, and then they want to maintain that, to project that perhaps out into the world, kind of have a container around that when they're interacting with others, to stay in their sovereignty, maybe energetically as well. Maybe you can talk about kind of those next steps on how one um, has boundaries and sets those up and protects their energy as they go
Mm-hmm.
about their day.
First off, is to be very mindful of how other people influence your own behavior, right? If you are trying to cut back on a potty mouth and cursing, and you are hanging around people who constantly curse and swear F you, F this at everything, then they are probably not in alignment with the person you want to be. Conversely, if your goal is to be skilled in weapons and to be a very strong, physically fit individual, and you're hanging out around librarians all day and priests, you are not setting yourself up to be sharpened by the energies that are most akin to your goal objective. Uh, Now going to a more, I'm going to say more chaotic level relating back to the holidays, when one is engaging with people that you have no control over, you're going to engage with different archetypes that are conflicting against your own. That is where practicing mindfulness is the biggest tool in one's toolbox, because the more you just observe yourself and how you feel in your interactions with others, the more you'll be able to self-diagnose your weak points of where, I can reflect on myself of where certain individuals who love to use comedy as a way of rage baiting or trolling people, now I can just I see the attack for what it is. I see it pressing on myself. And the secret is to not respond, or it's to respond with like. But that again remains a choice with each person on whether or not how they wish to respond. I know that my father, in the face of such attacks, because behind every joke is a little bit of truth. That's why comedy is so effective. But he just silence is his greatest weapon. And that's also another thing. Silence, whether you're in the face of someone seeking to rage bait you, someone seeking to provoke you in terms of something that they know is sensitive towards you, whether it be your weight, what you're eating, your views on something, just being quiet is sometimes the best thing you can do, because when you don't reciprocate and they just give you energy and you don't reciprocate, well, it becomes a one-way flow of traffic, and eventually they'll burn themselves out.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. The term like trigger comes up when I think about that theme. Is other people may try to get a response out of you, try to push your button one way or another, have you engage with them, maybe pull you down to their level if they're trying to come at you with negativity and hate and things like that. I think that's a good point on the mindfulness, to just realize in that moment, because I know, from personal experience, when you're being either made fun of or called out, like, you have this emotional reaction, and like it's like a fast twitch muscle where it's like, am I going to throw a fist? Am I going to run away? Like the fight or flight mentality. But if you are able to bring yourself back to a centered and grounded state, then you can kind of see the situation for what it is and make a informed choice as to how you respond, whether that be no response at all, just staying silent, responding, like you said, in kind with a joke, coming back at them with love and compassion, which throws people off, I'm sure, oftentimes. So maybe could you suggest any practices in those moments when we may feel emotionally triggered, how to bring mindfulness when people are trying to pull our minds into their own
Mm-hmm.
spheres?
The biggest tip is to just breathe, right? Because I think we touched on this last week, as far as, when you're around someone who is triggering you in any capacity, even at a subconscious level, without them even saying or doing anything, if you find that it's hard to breathe in your belly, then your subconscious mind, your body already know that they're on alert, that they don't feel fully safe and comfortable. But the more that you can consciously foster that sense of well-being, the more you're going to feel better at the physiological level, which is then going to have an upward cascading effect on your psychology as well. Because again, we can consciously influence the human organism to where we feel safer even in the face of chaos. This is a large part of military training, is stress inoculation. continuing to ramp up the levels of stress and intensity to where one still doesn't get bent out of shape over it, right?
It's like an exposure
Mm-hmm.
exposure therapy type of approach where, like you're saying, the things that you fear are probably showing aspects of yourself that you may not want to believe are there or confront or ask questions around it. So putting yourself into those situations that are making you uncomfortable, that you know you don't want to do, it's probably a good place to start as far as discovering where your boundaries might be infringed upon, or you may be triggered to overstep them or allow others past.
Spot on. Yes. Yes. Go in the direction of that which you most fear or what is most uncomfortable with for you. Because again, we can look at this very logically. Don't need to be a shaman to figure this out. It's if you're scared of talking to girls and you never talk to girls, you're never going to get better at talking to girls. If
Right.
you're scared to go to the gym because you're weak, well then you're never going to get stronger because you're never going to actually do the thing that you secretly want to be better at. If
Hmm.
if you want to be able to hold your own in a conversation and not be affected by the opinions and views and energies of others, but you never put yourself in those situations, well, you know, I myself personally have never taken much value from fighters who have perfect teeth and perfect noses, but someone who's been hit around a few times might know a thing or two about combat.
Right. Yeah. If you've never lost, then you haven't, I guess, competed
Mm-hmm.
enough out there to challenge yourself and truly find your own edge and limits. One of these metaphors that's been in the back of my mind as we've been talking, um, life as the river, and there's the flow of the river, and you can, like, float on your back, and spirit can kind of guide you down and take you on your journey, maybe somewhat passively, versus swimming one direction, the other, upstream even.
Mm,
It seems like what we've been talking about today is more active, less of a go with the flow and more of a build brick by brick, getting out of the river entirely. Like, maybe have you considered that type of approach, or what are your thoughts on that kind of advice to go with the flow?
so I love duality and I love shattering at the same time. So, and I'm gonna get to your answer, but I'm just gonna reference two things quickly. Two of my favorite pieces of writing are Invictus by Ernest Hemingway, and the second one will be Psalms 23 from the Bible. And Invictus is a very egoic, very self-centered about being uncomfortable, about being the captain of one's own ship, the master of one's own soul. This, the self, am going to self-determine myself and my place in this universe, no matter what outside forces come my way. Whereas Psalms 23 is, the Lord is my shepherd, this very much surrendering to a divine will, to a higher power. So to answer your question is, there are times in my life where I find that grabbing one's own testicles and being a man and just being very egoic in terms of getting what you want. If you want something, you have to go get it, right? That masculine drive. There's times for that. But there are other times where I find that meditation and prayer and just stepping back and surrendering to what is also most best. So I'm not going to give the audience a prescription of what to do. You must determine for yourself how to apply yourself in each situation. Is it best to force something, or is it best just to walk away and let things be? There's been times where I have achieved great results in an endeavor because of my testicular fortitude and will, and there's other times where I've achieved great things just by letting go and seeing what comes. But you won't
Hmm.
know for yourself until you learn through trial and error.
Yeah, yeah, I think that makes sense in my own experience as far as it seems like a dance, kind of like a balance. Sometimes the situation calls for will and force and the power of your own decision making and actions, and other times the best outcome or the outcome you'd prefer would tend to come about more easily if you remove yourself from trying to influence the outcome too strongly in one direction or another. So I think that makes sense as far as seeing what the situation presents for itself. But also like the metaphor of the Chinese finger trap, where if you pull apart your fingers too hard, it just hurts you in the process. So like you kind of have to like let go and then ease your way out of it. So not trying to force things too much, and also I think this concept of non-attachment that comes up a lot in yogic philosophies too is you can maybe have preferences for what you want the outcomes to be, but if you're too attached to a specific outcome, then perhaps the universe may conspire to keep it from you just that much longer.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so on boundaries, any other aspects of this topic that we want to explore?
Well, just again, to going back to what you said about the confliction between pushing versus pulling away, the same thing holds true for our boundaries in terms of our interactions with people. If someone is intentionally, engaging, and you and I did this as well, like as far as the power of silence, when a situation is presenting itself that is not agreeable or chaotic, the power of just observing how your own consciousness influences the room.
Hmm.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. You should pretend as if everyone can hear your thoughts because they can. Even if they're not consciously psychic, everyone is connected and subconsciously aware of the every single emotion and energy flowing through you at any given time. So if you just simply become that rock or anchor in a storm, you can see a drastic shift in the room that you're in. So, if someone is engaging in a certain way, if a baby is crying and you're thinking in your head, "Oh, just shut up, just be quiet," etc. But if you just stop, again, where attention goes, energy flows. If you stop paying attention to it, chances are it will be quiet of its own accord. You know, or when a dog is barking, if someone yells at the dog, well, they're just joining in the cacophony with it.
Hmm.
And to the human's surprise, sarcasm, the dog keeps barking. Well, you're just feeding you're feeding like with like.
Right.
So again, like we said, it's a dance, and people will have to learn to navigate them all on their own with their own toolbox. But I hope that today we have shined some light on some different methods and tools to establish one's own left, right, and vertical limits.
Yeah, I mean, I can't help but ask this. So, the psychic and everyone can kind of tell your thoughts. I love that framework. I mean, it's almost kind of like the concept of all is one and God is all, and we're all part of this interconnected matrix of existence, and so thus like we're all interconnected and can kind of just pick up on these things that our brains may not be like actively consciously processing. But on the topic of boundaries, is there a way to prevent others from reading your thoughts and things like that, and like kind of knowing what's going on under the hood?
Yeah, there is, but that is a multidimensional aspect, again, from the spiritual aspect of learning the chakras, learning, again, different metals, stones, colors, and their influence, from the physical aspect of body language and how one is portraying oneself in their physicality and what information they are giving everyone in a room. And then there's also the astrology of like water signs are like Scorpios are going to be more psychic than Scorpios and Cancers are going to be the most psychic people in a room. They're
Hmm.
going to just feel people's emotions, and also by knowing how to read other people, they know how to disguise themselves. So that's a much broader topic. But yes, you can learn to conceal your intentions and energy from others, but that falls into much Sun Tzu and Dr. Ha Ha Lung in terms of deception.
Got you. Hit up Nobu on the side for lessons in these perhaps dark arts, keeping yourself in the shadows. Cool. Yeah, just another thing that had come up as you were saying the like with the dog barking and the energy you're feeding into it. The visual that was in the Ram Dass "Be Here Now" book of like hippies create hippies create police, and like the fight that they have going on. It's like they almost need each other. So they may say they hate the other side and they want to destroy them, but without the other side then they too are destroyed. So it's like this kind of self-perpetuating loop. And I think the best approach, like you're saying, is just the mindfulness in that, to like really take the step back and be like, what is going on here? What am I feeding with my attention and energy, and is it something I want to perpetuate?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Any last comments we want to leave the audience with here, Nobu?
Just breathe and feel. You'll figure it out one step at a time.
Amen. Thank you, Nobu. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you next time.